Hey guys, Dr. Frank here, another episode of Cannabis and Medicine. We've got two guests on the show tonight. First is Kelly O'Neill, a woman whose two daughters have been suffering from epilepsy for the past 20 years, and she has been fighting like heck to get access to medical cannabis and medicinal cannabis oil, as well as Phillip Monk, who runs an organization called WTU, and they're fighting to claim that denying someone the right to obtain cannabis oil is essentially an abrogation of someone's human rights. Let's see what they have to say. Hi, guys.
Hey, Frank. Good evening.
Good evening. Now, Phil, you run or you are organized as WTU. What is WTU?
WTU was a bit of an accident in a nutshell, Frank. I've been a therapeutic cannabis consumer, well, since I was 16, but aware of it for the last 4 years and an active campaigner. About 12 weeks ago, there was a lot in the British media about little Alfie, Murray, Billy, all these little children that we know that are suffering, and obviously cannabis oil. And I got a bee in my bonnet because I've always felt it's against my human rights to deny me access to this herbal remedy. So I decided to write to every human rights solicitor in the United Kingdom to ask them if they thought I had a case and if they'd help me fight it. And then in the last moment, I decided, as I was involved with other reform groups, to invite other members if they wanted to undersign to this letter I was sending to all of these solicitors. So I was taking my daughter to Taekwondo, and I quickly fired out the message to everybody. And by the time I got back, there was a couple of hundred responses. And 12 weeks later, we've got over 3,000 people now that kind of believe the same thing as what we, the undersigned, is asking for, which in a nutshell would be freedom and equality with the toxic recreational drug consumers of alcohol. We should have the same protections in law as they have. We should have the same freedoms in law as they have. And this inequality in society, would like to challenge that. So that was how it all started, really. And it's been a very busy 12 weeks since I had that little idea. And it's been quite momentous. I've met yourself in Parliament at the Cannabis and Medicine Conference, which was a great honour. Thank you. And it's been quite a whirlwind, really, and a lot of changes happening. So just seeing what's going on now.
Well, there's a lot happening. Obviously, the whole thing at Parliament was wonderful. Now, Kelly, didn't meet you there, but from what I understand, you have a story that needs to be told, a story that if it doesn't break your heart, then you just don't have one. And so there are times when I love to hear myself talk, but I think, Kelly, this is one of those moments where I really like to hear you talk. And I'm just going to give you the floor. Would you please tell us a little about yourself and your experience with cannabis as medicine?
Yeah. Well, I've got two daughters with epilepsy. I've got 3 children, and 2 of my daughters at age 6 were diagnosed with childhood epilepsy, unknown cause. They are 24 and 15 now. So it happened 10 years apart. The first diagnosis was with my eldest daughter, Danielle. She had complex partial seizures, altered behaviour. We went through years of the usual anti-epileptics and the horrible side effects of them all. School problems, relationship problems with her because of the nature of epilepsy. It's not just somebody has a seizure. When people have chronic epilepsy, the impact on their life and the lives of the people around them is absolutely horrendous. And then when our youngest daughter was the same age, she also started having seizures. She had an explosive onset. This was 8 years ago. It was so severe that the only way they could stop her seizures was by putting her into a coma. And they couldn't even I hear the stories of these other mothers. Alfie's mum, Charlotte and Hannah with their children. I've watched my 29 kilo 7-year-old daughter be pumped full of enough midazolam that would take a 150 kilogram man out, and it didn't. It made her worse. It made her like an absolute animal that was just frothing at the mouth. It was horrendous. And the only way they could treat her was by dampening down her immune system and using lots of other dangerous drugs to try and bring her around. She was stuck in back-to-back seizures for 2 weeks, and they weren't grand mal ones, they were complex partial ones. It was just awful. I don't know whether you're aware, but we're in the process. She was treated for autoimmune encephalitis.
Right, for those people out there, the body essentially attacks the brain. I mean, just imagine that. Please, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
She's had this 18 years. In the last 2 years, she's had such severe bouts of it, all triggered by an anti-epileptic or an antibiotic on prescription. This landed her in hospital twice. The last time, she's just come out of 3 weeks of being in hospital, where I fought the doctors every step of the way to stop giving her pharmaceutical drugs, which are triggering the response. But because they don't understand about this response, we haven't even got the diagnosis. But luckily, 18 months ago, we found high-strength CBD oil, and we've been sponsored by a beautiful company in the UK who are helping my daughters, because I met them last year at a cannabis conference in the UK. This is something I don't understand, Dr. Frank. Maybe you can help me. How come the politicians are allowing investors to flood to the UK and they're still prosecuting people and taking our hope and sorting out their dividends as people suffer and die?
You know there's no answer to that.
Sorry?
There's no answer to that. There's
Well,
just,
there needs to be.
it's almost evil.
There needs to be.
It's
Yeah,
evil.
I feel it's evil.
It's just
I feel
evil.
it's-
I mean, that's what people don't understand. It's okay for them to deny other people medicine because it hasn't affected them. It hasn't affected their family. I have had 7 children. When my kids get a cold for 3 days, I'm up all night. I couldn't even imagine 24/7 of wondering what's going to happen to my child who's having seizures. You can't sleep. You can't function. So it's okay to come up with all these nonsense arguments against it because it doesn't touch me. Why should I change it now? How can you not sit and look at a family who's going through this, through the emotional stress, the PTSD you must be suffering with, watching your child be sick all the time, and then have
Absolutely.
the temerity to deny these people access to a plant oil?
Absolutely.
It makes my brain want to explode.
And it gets worse than that, to know these allegations of the very policy makers making millions of pounds profit has just, it has crushed me.
Is that about?
I have no faith left in any system in the United Kingdom. The NHS is being ripped apart and people are suffering. This last 3 weeks in a southwest hospital in England, I was shocked. It was looking at a business, an industry. There's pumping people. I had to pay for 3 weeks on top of all this now. I'm on benefits because you're right. I have PTSD because the last seizure my daughter had and she was suffocating during it, and I thought this was it. Sudept was going to get it. The last 3 weeks ago, my daughter was so unwell in an ambulance with psychosis. The police pulled over the ambulance, manhandled her and handcuffed her, and status epilepticus looked at her boyfriend and said, "What's she been on, mate? She's off her nut." That's what epileptics have to face all the time. My daughter was sectioned 2 years ago for it. The suffering my daughter goes through at the hands of corruption. When eight years ago they've been sending Epidiolex to New South Wales in Australia for a compassionate programme for children with Dravet's. What about the cannabis? What about the epileptic communities of the United Kingdom who have held? The only thing they have left is hope. When my second daughter got unwell, I didn't think I'd make it through another life, watching another child suffer under the pharmaceuticals and the no hope and the no understanding in the education system, or the staff at hospitals. 80% of them are care assistants now, and they've never seen a grand mal seizure, let alone a petit mal. They couldn't even watch these people. They're being arrested, sectioned. It's horrible, and this is why I've reached the point where I can no longer hold my silence. because I've seen so much suffering. And it's not just my daughters, it's thousands of people. Mothers having to say goodbye to their children with cancer, with parents, children saying goodbye to their parents, people with such severe psychiatric illnesses because of the psychiatric medications they're being doled out and made to deal and administer at home.
How is it for Danielle when they have access to cannabis then, Kelly?
Well, the good news is 18 months ago her life changed round. After the 4 weeks in hospital, 2 of them in psychiatric wards where they tried giving her things like pregabalin, clonazepam.
You mentioned she had a seizure 4 hours after taking the antibiotic. How long had it been before her previous seizure?
It was, well, we found some new oil, and she's, right, if I go to 18 months ago after the time when she went to hospital for 4 weeks, I went online and I begged publicly on Facebook for anybody who knew anything about cannabis, or could they please help us? The doctors had told me to take her home and make her comfortable because they couldn't stop her seizures anymore, and it was awful. And so luckily we found some, and it was CBD oil only, and I tried it first. No instructions, because for 2 years ago, I mean, when you're faced with death or
you try anything.
You will try anything. So I tried it first, like you do, being a good mum, made sure it wasn't poisonous. Got it off some really nice people, but I was still very uneducated, nervous. But I thought, how this has got to be better than my daughter could go into a mental hospital for the rest of her days. And she started 2 hours later. She had her last seizure for about 3 weeks, and it was like first time in ages. No anti-epileptics, no nothing. And then she went another 3 weeks before she had one. And then slowly she was going from, at her worst, 10 gram a day, or she could have a week where she'd have 5 complex partial. Her complex partials would include stripping off and running up the street opera singing. So, the cannabis oils we've introduced to her. But I must add here, at age 15, she found cannabis through the streets, through her friends, smoking joints and whatever. She lost everybody in her life except me, because 10 years ago there was no awareness. It was really hidden from everyone, and people were just stoners and wasters. And how could somebody with epilepsy smoke cannabis? Oh my God, she's nothing but a little druggie. The stigma and the bullying and the disgrace she felt, because she said to me, this was her words, not mine, she felt like the fire in her mind was settling down when she smoked. It was like she stopped shaking, she stopped sweating profusely. These are all side effects of the anti-epileptics she was on. So the cannabis wasn't only treating the side effects of the anti-epileptics, we understand it was providing some neural protection as well.
I'm listening to this. I got a million things to say. When we were in Parliament last week, it was fabulous that the Home Secretary gave Billy a 23-day supply of cannabis oil to try to get him out of the hospital. But I try to impress upon people, there's tens of thousands of Billies who don't have the publicity of his case, who are out there suffering, families. How do you piecemeal this? How do you just decide, well, this family had enough publicity so that I have to make sure that they get their medicine, but all these other families don't? Everybody's afraid of this big slippery slope that once you allow the first medicinal cannabis user in the UK, there's going to be thousands of them. Well, yeah, there are, because there's going to be thousands of people who need it. There's a Questcor and Mallinckrodt put out a pill or a vial of anti-seizure medicine called Actar. And this stuff supposedly is amazing. They won't tell you how it works. My guess is that it hits the endocannabinoid system, but they're not going to tell us that. When they first released this on the market 4 years ago, they sold it for $240 a bottle. Today, it's $23,000 a bottle. They raised it 97,000%. Who has that kind of money? Epilepsy is a lifelong disease. I got no words. I have no words.
Epilepsy is probably a symptom of an underlying problem, which is what I've discovered.
I would suggest it's an
probably right.
endoplasmic syndrome.
I've had 19 years frontline 24/7. I'm not, I'm not a highly educated woman, but I'm a damn good mother and I love my children and it's my job to do the best I can for them. So I research, I go to meetings, I try to stay in the loop, and I've just reached the point now where it's all about money. They don't care about people's lives because you're right, they don't have to live them, and it's really hard to explain this to them. My daughter deserves the right, dignity and freedom to grow her own medicine. Just as people with depression and anxiety are allowed to go and buy a litre of vodka because some minister's getting rich off the tax of it, to go and administer that for their pain at home. My daughter can use a safe plant to do that herself. We can't use their synthesized versions.
I'm going to call that the killer clause. The one, what you're referring to there, Kelly, it is in their new guidelines. When I say they, the UK government, they've released some new guidelines about how people could lawfully access cannabis therapeutic. And they've got a little clause in there, which is very important to me because of what's happened with me and relevant to you. It says that people, the clinician must prove that the patient has tried all lawful licensed and unlicensed drugs before they're permitted to try cannabis therapeutics. Now, in my circumstances, I've had a mini stroke scare from citalopram, a brain hemorrhage scare from beta blockers, a cancer scare from tramadol, and a cancer scare from Oromorph. I refuse gabapentin, I refuse pregabalin or any other opiate-based drug, and I replaced it all with cannabis. But that clause would refuse me the right to use cannabis and would dictate I have to go and use the gabapentin, the pregabalin, or even if they have an experimental unlicensed drug, I've still got to use that before I can access cannabis. And then is that herbal
Which you know already works.
And that, sorry?
Which you know already works for you.
Well, I know it works for me.
It
works. I've used it for years now, but they would force me to try these things, and that's.
Well, hold on a second. What if your physician said, "Yeah, they've tried it already"? Is someone going to come back and give them a checklist to say, "What did you try this, 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 and this?" Or are they going to leave it up to the physician's judgment? Because if you leave it up to the physician's judgment, he can say, "Yeah, no, they tried everything. We're ready." Which is what I would do.
In that way. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but you've got to try and find a physician in this country who's willing to even consider this.
Yeah.
They're all still so in the bloody dark of you. You wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't.
Yeah, I am having trouble understanding this.
In Canada, in America, in whatever other countries, Israel, all the countries out there, Germany, they're all making moves forward. How the hell can the UK be the largest exporter and cultivator and producer when they're still using Dark Age law to the people, to the slaves?
There's no answer.
And the slaves remain sick and weak.
I don't know what to say. I'm holding my head. The bottom line is, this is a plant. This is a plant that exists on this planet the way we exist on this planet. And from what I understand, when you go to a nice restaurant in Italy, they try to get all the food from the same area, locally sourced. Because if it grows together, it goes together.
Yeah.
Well, if we're on this planet and so is the cannabis, it goes together. I mean, otherwise it wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
It would have figured out a way not to exist. I want to thank you both. This was wonderful. Kelly, I wish you and your family the best. And if there's anything I can do, please, just, my people, just let me know. Phil, nice seeing you again, buddy.
Thank you, Frank. Take care of yourself.
All right, we'll talk again, I promise you.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.